And now exclusive reporting from the Washington Post that reveals that in those critical moments after those flash floods ripped through Texas Hill Country, FEMA's acting administrator, David Richardson, could not be reached for 24 hours. That meant that under new rules put in place by the Trump administration, key resource deployments could not be approved. Search and rescue teams that are typically on the ground within 12 to 24 hours of a disaster didn't show up for 4 days. When asked by the Post about the Texas response, FEMA's press secretary said, many in the federal government, including acting administrator Richardson, have loving families to attend to and take care of. President Trump and Secretary Noem included. Brianna Sachs broke this exclusive reporting for the Washington Post. She joins me now, along with Jeremy Edwards, former Deputy Director of Public Affairs for FEMA. Brianna, can you tell us more about the inability to reach Richardson?
Sure. So based on some officials I talked to who were involved in the deployment of coordination of resources to Texas on July 5th, they could not get a hold of the acting administrator. He's been there since the end of May, and it reflected a greater pattern, they said, of his inaccessibility. He frequently is offline after work and on the weekends. And for this role, I learned through the reporting, you have to always be on. You have to be able to get onto a phone, a secure phone, a lot of the time within 20 minutes. And why this was such a big holdup was because this administration, DSH Secretary Kristi Noem, has put in some strict new budget requirements, which she needs to approve every expense over $100,000. A lot of these resources cost more than that. And Richardson is kind of the direct tie to get these approvals in front of her and get them signed off quickly. So it was just a holdup that really delayed some critical resources getting to the ground in Texas.
Jeremy, you know this firsthand. Talk about the impact of an administrator being unreachable during a disaster, particularly one of this magnitude.
Yes, thank you for having me on, Chris. And just before I do that, I can't let go of that statement from the FEMA press secretary that spoke about loving families deserving time off, and not a zero mention of the loving families who are still grieving the losses of their family and friends who have been lost in these devastating floods. It's completely tone deaf and does not meet the moment that is required when we're following such a tragic disaster. But to your question, it's completely ridiculous for a FEMA administrator or any senior officials at FEMA, people like me in the role, to be unreachable for that long. You know, if I was unreachable for more than a few hours, I might get chewed out by the FEMA administrator at the time. You know, with FEMA Administrator Criswell, she was always able to be accessed wherever she was. The chief of staff and other senior officials knew how to get in touch with her. So the fact that this FEMA administrator, acting FEMA administrator, is completely unreachable for more than 24 hours, I think speaks to his lack of ability and his unqualifications to do this job.
Yeah, back to that statement. Nobody's saying you can't take a vacation with your kids, right? But
right.
We never know when disaster is going to strike, Jeremy. So even if someone is off the grid, I mean, there are systems, I assume, and policies in place to be in touch with key disaster response leaders.
Well, that was some of the reporting that I oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you know, I think everyone here on this program right now wants or needs a vacation. I think any of us that have taken time off from work, you always take steps to make sure that your work is going to be covered in your absence. The same is to be expected of people at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that you're going to have people deputized on your behalf if you were unreachable. So if the FEMA Administrator Criswell wasn't available, she had a deputy, Administrator Hooks. If he was unavailable, the list goes on and on. It's called a chain of command. So you figured somebody like Mr. Richardson, who has military experience and is probably familiar with the chain of command, would have set up systems in place to make sure that work wasn't getting missed while he was out.
Yeah, make sure there's a system even when you have the new rules in place. So, Brianna, bring it into now, because you've also reported this incident is reflective of a general lack of urgency at the agency. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so everyone I've talked to, about 20 people over the last 3 months have been expressing concern that he's really not, as Jeremy said, qualified to lead the agency. And also compared to his predecessor, Cameron Hamilton, who Noam ousted for going against her goal to eliminate FEMA in a big way, just hasn't really been digging into the job and seems to be distracted. Doesn't spend a lot of time at headquarters. And I learned a lot about what past administrators have been like, and they're very involved. They're doing a lot of FaceTime with staff. And I think it's just reflective of how this administration views this agency, which is not as important as others. But meanwhile, if a disaster hits a state that's not like Texas, it doesn't have all the resources, it's not as well equipped, it could cost lives if FEMA doesn't have a leader in place who is able to do the job and get resources there and is available.
Great reporting by Brianna Sachs. Jeremy Edwards, it's great to have you on the show as well, lending your expertise. Thank you both.